Chapter 1. Guest. The lie tasted like champagne. Specifically, like sour champagne, which Rose had stopped drinking 3 minutes into her arrival because she counted 7 exits, 4 obvious threats, and exactly 1 man across the ballroom who was watching her instead of her dress. She set the flute down on a passing tray and accepted a fresh one she also wouldn't drink. And the embroidery, my dear, the embroidery! Nobody under 3 centuries can stitch a proper griffin anymore. It's the modern attention span. They simply cannot sit still long enough. Astonishing, said Rose, who had not heard a single word. The Baroness Althea, who had hair the color of a setting sun and a smile with too much investment in it, leaned in. And you, Cecily of House Ashby, where did you say you trained? I didn't. You didn't? No. How fascinating. The Baroness's smile widened by an exact tooth. We must talk about your education. Soon. At length. Rose smiled the smile she had practiced in 3 different mirrors in 3 different cities. The Baroness drank it like champagne. Rose drank nothing. Across the room, the man who was watching her had not stopped watching her. She knew exactly who he was. She had studied his face for months. King Aurelius, tall and quiet and inhumanly composed, with shoulder-length silver hair that caught the chandelier light like water, and dark eyes that even from 40 feet away had the unmistakable quality of having seen too much and not forgotten any of it. She had also studied the layout of his ballroom, the schedule of his court, the rotation of the door guards, and the location of every silver-laced blade in her possession, 1 strapped to her thigh, 2 sewn into the bodice seam, 3 woven into the pins that held her hair. She felt for all 3 with the smallest internal check. All present. She was Rose Ashby of the Mortal Guild, with 17 confirmed contracts and 1 extremely large pending payment. The job was simple. Get close, find a weakness, drive a silver blade through the heart of the most powerful vampire in the known world, walk out, disappear. The man across the room nodded at her, a small, almost imperceptible thing. Rose, against every instinct she possessed, nodded back. Her heart, the traitor, gave 1 sharp thump, and in a ballroom full of vampires, she heard it as if it had been shouted. The man across the room smiled. He did not look away. Rose turned very calmly back to the Baroness, who was now describing in some detail the moral failings of someone called Vintner Hollow. Aurelius had felt her arrive in the way one feels weather coming in, the change in pressure before the storm. He had been listening to Lord Marius complain about the aqueducts. He was still, technically, listening to Lord Marius complain about the aqueducts. And I told them, the Romans built better drainage in 6 months than you have in 12 years. But of course no one wants to hear a comparison to the Romans anymore. The Romans are unfashionable. Marius? And I'll have you know I personally knew 3 Romans, and not one of them. Marius, who is the woman in the green dress? Marius paused mid-gesture. He looked. He sniffed. That, he said, is a problem. Is she? Cecily of House Ashby. She arrived this morning with papers from a branch of the family I am almost certain has been dead for 90 years. Almost certain. Eloise is in the archives. She will return shortly with the news that I am completely certain. Why do you ask? Aurelius did not take his eyes off the woman in the green dress. She stood beside the Baroness in the perfect attentive posture of someone not listening to a word being said. Her hands held the champagne flute the way a soldier holds a sword that hasn't been drawn yet. She held the glass like a weapon, he said. What? And she hasn't taken a sip. Is this going to be a thing? And there is a knife strapped to her thigh. You can smell a knife strapped to her thigh? Yes. I can also smell whetstone and bear oil and the lavender they use in the Mortal Guild's safe houses. Either an extremely well-prepared cousin or an assassin. Which is more interesting? Marius made the small sound he made when something distressing was occurring. You are not, he said, going to do what I think you are going to do. Introduce me, Marius. You are going to introduce yourself to an assassin. You are going to introduce me to a guest. The assassin is my problem. Marius pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. I have known you for 312 years. I have watched you make exactly 4 decisions I considered actively suicidal. This is the 4th. It is the 5th. You forgot Venice. I am repressing Venice. Reasonable. Marius walked with the weariness of a man who had been walking somewhere he didn't want to go for several centuries, toward Rose. The introduction was a blur. Rose remembered the velvet of the ballroom, the dry hand of Lord Marius, who looked up close like a desiccated hawk forced into a doublet, and then the king. Up close he was worse, not monstrous. The truth was he looked perfectly normal. Tall, lean, beautifully dressed in midnight. Silver hair to just past his shoulders, swept back from a face the candlelight made marble of. Eyes mahogany brown with flecks of gold like coins at the bottom of a well. He looked perfectly normal. That was what was wrong with him. Dangerous men advertised. Squared shoulders, hand near a weapon, occupied doorway. Aurelius did none of these. He stood completely still. He breathed because he was performing breath. Underneath the performance, he was as still as something that did not need to be alive. Cecily of House Ashby, he said, welcome to my court. Your Majesty. His hand closed around hers. Cool, not corpse cool, like stone that had been sitting in a shaded river. Her own hand against his felt embarrassingly alive. You aren't drinking your champagne, he said. I'm pacing myself. A wise approach. The vintage is regrettable. Is it? I am told it's adequate. I have not had wine in some time. How long? She stopped. Do not ask the man how long it has been since he drank wine. That is not the kind of question you ask. His mouth did something, not a smile exactly, but the place a smile would live if he had decided to allow one. I am sure, he said, you will find our hospitality more interesting than our wine. His thumb passed once very lightly across the back of her knuckles. He let her hand go. His eyes traveled, without any apparent movement, to the line of her thigh under the green silk. He looked back at her face. He was, still, smiling. Rose understood in a single cold rush that this man knew exactly who she was. He had known the moment she walked into the room. He had read her like the cover of a book he had already finished. And he had walked over, and he had taken her hand, and he had let her keep all 3 knives. He bowed and moved on through the crowd, leaving her in the middle of a ballroom full of people who did not know what she was, and one man who did. She turned to Marius. Marius was looking at her the way one looks at a small dog that has just walked, unnoticed, into the path of a horse. Welcome to court, my dear, he said. Do try to be careful where you set your champagne down. She returned to her rooms. She inventoried her weapons. She had 3. She locked the door. She sat on the edge of the enormous bed and tried to plan. She could not plan. She had been trained for many things. She had not been trained for a target who smiled at her and let her go. Outside, somewhere in the castle, a clock struck 3. She heard it. Down a long corridor, in a study lined with books from 7 centuries, the king heard it too. He set down the file his librarian had just placed on his desk, a slim folder labeled with 3 small words, House Ashby, extinct, and looked, for a long moment, at nothing. Then he opened it. Then he smiled. Chapter 2. Chess. The first weapon went missing on the 3rd night. Rose noticed by inventory the small daily ritual she had performed for 11 years without missing a day. She had been seated 3 places from the king at dinner. He had looked at her exactly twice. She returned to her rooms, locked the door, sat on the bed, and counted. Pin, there. Pin, there. Pin. In the place where the third hairpin had been, on the velvet of the cushion, was a single white feather. She picked it up. She turned it over. She walked the perimeter. Door locked, windows 3 stories above the garden, wardrobe empty, nothing under the bed. She came back. The feather was still there. The next morning, the second blade was gone. In its place, a chess piece. A small white queen carved from horn, from a very old and very expensive set. She set it down on the dressing table next to the feather. By Friday, she had a feather, a white queen, a pressed maple leaf in a color her mother had once called respectable scarlet, a small carved bone die marked with symbols she did not recognize, and a folded note in a clean, even hand that simply read, "No." She had asked the maid. The maid had blinked, said in perfect, court-trained politeness that she had not noticed anything unusual, my lady, and then, while curtsying, stepped on Rose's slipper, just hard enough to make it clear the conversation was over. She kept up appearances. At Baroness Althea's Tuesday evening salon, she discovered the Baroness had spent 3 days inventing an increasingly detailed backstory for Cecily of House Ashby. A love affair with a minor southern duke, an unfortunate gambling problem, and a recent religious conversion to something obscure, dear, I forget the name. I had no idea, said Rose. Of course you didn't, dear. That's why I have to tell you. People talk so much. You really should know what they're saying. And what should I say when they ask? The Baroness leaned forward. Her eyes were warm and shrewd and very, very old. Whatever you like, she murmured. But, my dear, pick one story. Stick to it. There is nothing this court enjoys more than catching out a liar, and there is nothing it enjoys less. Rose smiled. Rose drank none of the wine. The Baroness, watching her, smiled back. A tooth too many, as always. She attended a council meeting. This was where it began to feel properly like a hallucination. She was escorted in by a silent guard, seated 3 places to the left of the king, given a folio she did not open, and informed she was welcome to take notes. There were 11 vampires in the room. 6 were openly staring. Lord Marius, at the king's right hand, was looking at a parchment as if it had personally insulted his mother. After 40 seconds of silence, he set the parchment down, looked up, and said, "Why is she here?" "She is observing." "Observing what?" "Matters of state." "Matters of—" Marius's voice rose, briefly, to the register of a man who had not been heard properly for several centuries, and then dropped with effort back to normal. "My king, with all the great respect I have accumulated for you over 312 years, what are you doing?" "I am holding a council meeting, Marius, as we are all very late for. Sit down." Marius sat down, but did not stop looking, occasionally and pointedly, at Rose. The meeting opened with a long discussion of road maintenance. Rose, who had spent the morning trying to figure out whether she could climb out of her bathroom window without breaking an ankle, focused very hard on not laughing. Aurelius did not look at her, but did not stop being aware of her, in a way she could feel like a hand at the small of her back. At one point, during a heated argument about a toll road, he tilted his head a fraction of a degree in her direction and said mildly, "Cecily, your thoughts." 11 vampires turned to look at her. Rose, who had been thinking about breaking into the Southern Guard Tower, said in the voice of a woman who had spent 11 years learning to lie smoothly, "Widen it. The cost of repair on a narrow road of that volume will exceed the cost of widening it within 5 years, and the merchants will pay the difference in tolls." There was a beat. The vampire who had been arguing for not widening it, a thin man whose name she didn't know, looked, for one unguarded second, deeply offended. Then he composed his face. "A reasonable point," he said. The king did not look at her. The king's mouth did the thing, the almost smile, the place where the smile would be. "Marius," he said, "make the motion." Marius made the motion. The motion passed. Rose, 3 places to the king's left, with no blades on her person except the small one in her hair, sat very still in her chair, and thought, with the clarity of a woman in the middle of a slow, careful, nervous breakdown. He is making me an advisor. I came here to kill him. He is making me an advisor. She found the muse by accident, half lost in the eastern corridor on the evening of her 9th day, when she heard a sound she could not identify, a soft, throaty trill. She turned a corner. A door stood open. Beyond it, a tall, vaulted chamber lined with perches, smelling of straw and wild feathers and mountain air. On the perch nearest the door sat the largest owl she had ever seen, white as new snow, yellow-eyed, staring at her with the focus normally reserved for prey. Rose, who had once held off a knife fighter in an alley in a city she no longer used the name of, found her feet had stopped without her permission. "Hello," she said. The owl blinked very slowly. "I should not be in here." The owl tilted its head. "I am going to leave." The owl lifted one foot. It deposited on the stone in front of its perch a small dead mouse. It looked at her. It looked at the mouse. It looked at her again. "Is that for me?" said Rose. The owl, with generations of inherited disappointment, lowered its foot. Rose crossed the room. She crouched in front of the perch. She held out one careful hand. The owl, after a considering pause, leaned forward and touched its beak gently against her knuckles. A voice from behind her, quiet. "Her name is Strix." She did not jump. She had been waiting for him for 10 minutes without admitting it to herself. "She has terrible manners." "She brought me a mouse." "That is excellent manners, for her." He came to stand beside Rose, not close, the careful distance of a man who had decided where she was allowed to be in his court and was waiting to see whether she would walk into it. "How old is she?" "Older than anyone in court except me. I found her in the north, wounded. She could have left at any time. She chose to stay." She felt the meaning land. She did not turn her head. "Some choices are like that." "Yes," he said. There was a long silence, broken only by the small, wet sounds of the owl, who had decided to eat the mouse herself. "Cecily, your hairpin is on my desk, and the dagger from your boot, and the small one from the bodice of last night's dress." She turned her head very slowly. His face was perfectly composed. His eyes, in the low light, were not. "I have to ask," he said softly, "whether you would prefer that I keep returning them." She held his gaze for what was, in the end, far too long. "I haven't decided yet." "Take your time." He bowed and walked away. Strix, when Rose finally looked back at her, was watching her with an expression Rose found impossible to interpret except as something a lot like sympathy. Marius caught her in the corridor that night. He stepped out from a doorway with the precise timing of a man who had been waiting at minimum an hour. "A word," he said. "Is it a long word?" "It is several words." She stopped. He looked her over as if cataloging a museum exhibit he was being forced to acquire against his judgment. "You are not the first stray he has brought into this court. The others did not last. I say this because he is my king and my oldest friend, and he has, on occasion, the survival instincts of a man who has forgotten what it is to die." "And what happened to the others?" "None of your business, yet." He stepped a half-step closer. He had not, she suddenly noticed, blinked once during the entire conversation. "He knows what you are," he said. Do not insult me." He knew the moment you set foot in his ballroom. "I am asking you, with what little patience I have left, the single question that matters." He waited. "What is the question? What are you going to do about it?" She opened her mouth. She closed it. She thought of the feather, the chess piece, the folded note, the council meeting, the owl's offered mouse, the thumb across her knuckles. "I do not know," she said. Marius made the small sound he made when something distressing was occurring. "That," he said, "is what I was afraid of." He turned and walked away down the corridor, muttering something that sounded, to her honed ears, like Venice. Venice all over again. Why does it always have to be Venice? Chapter 3. The File. She started reading in the library because she didn't know where else to be. A circle of stone 4 floors high, lined with leather books, a polite fire burning at all hours. There was always at least one vampire in there. Most ignored her. One, an enormously fat man surrounded by a fortress of unbound manuscripts, looked up on her 4th visit and said, "You hold a book like you are about to throw it at someone," and returned to his reading. It was, all things considered, the friendliest welcome she had received from the court. She started with the southern provinces. She moved on to 3 biographies of long-dead kings, then a treatise on forest rights in the mountain districts. She did not, the entire time, find anything about her parents. She had not expected to. She just hadn't expected the absence to feel so loud. Aurelius found her on the 11th night. She was in the library armchair nearest the fire, her boots off, her stockinged feet tucked beneath her, a book the size of a small dog open across her knees. She had been crying, quietly, the way one cried in a room full of vampires, and had then very carefully repaired her face. She did not hear him enter. He moved with a soundlessness that she was learning to read as respect. "You're up late," he said. "I am pacing myself." "With reading?" "With everything." He sat down opposite her in the leather chair, set a small cloth-bound folder on the low table between them, and did not open it. He glanced at the book on her lap. "The Forest Rights of the Northern Reach," he read upside down. "That's an interesting choice." "I was looking for something." "Did you find it?" "No." "Were you looking for it in the southern province histories first?" She went very still. "Yes," she said. "Cecily, don't. I had the records pulled the night you arrived." She did not look up. She kept her eyes on the page of the Forest Rights of the Northern Reach, on a paragraph she had read 4 times without absorbing a single word. "House Ashby has been extinct for 93 years. I had Heloise check what your real name might be, on the theory that the guild prefers its operatives to retain at least their first name. By the 3rd morning, I had one. Stop. I had her check the public records of your home county, the muster rolls, the depositions of the witnesses." She closed the book. "They were collateral damage in a war between 2 mortal lords," he said very quietly, "which had nothing to do with vampires. Their names appear in the casualty list. I have the page. It is in this folder." She did not move. "I am not telling you this to hurt you. I am telling you because I think you already suspect it, and you will not be able to do anything about anything else until you know." She looked up. He was watching her with an expression she had not seen before. Not pity. Pity she would have hated. Something quieter. The face of a man who had personally received a great deal of bad news in his life, and who had learned, over centuries, exactly how to deliver it. "You're showing me," she said, "the proof that my contract is a lie." "Yes. And then you're going to tell me the rest, aren't you?" He hesitated. It was the first time she had ever seen him hesitate. "The guild contacted me 3 days ago," he said, "through a back channel I have used for 50 years. They asked me whether their operative had been compromised. I gave the polite answer, which is to say I gave no answer. They will read that as a yes. They will send someone. How long do I have?" 2 weeks, possibly 3. She set the book down on the floor. She put her stockinged feet on the cold stone. She picked up the folder. She did not open it. She held it in her lap. "Why?" she said. "Why did you tell me?" "Because you came here to kill me, Cecily. And the least I can do, in exchange for that very flattering attention, is tell you the truth." She laughed. It came out wrong. It came out cracked, the way her mother had laughed once, in a memory she had not allowed herself to think about in years. She put a hand over her mouth. He did not move. He did not reach across the small table to take her hand. He did not offer her wine or comfort. He sat in the leather chair, his silver hair catching the firelight, his hands folded on his knee, and let her cry without performing the kindness of looking away. She cried for a long time. When she stopped, he said very softly, "There's a window in the east corridor. The dawn comes through it. We aren't supposed to. I watch it sometimes. It's the only thing left that genuinely frightens me. He glanced at the folder. I was a man before I was a king. I had parents. I do not remember their faces clearly. I remember the way my mother folded laundry. I remember my father once broke his hand on a horse trough and did not tell anyone for 3 days because he was embarrassed. That is what I have left of them. 400 years and a folded napkin and a horse trough. She made the sound again, smaller. And a window I am not supposed to watch. Yes. Aurelius. Yes. My name, she said, is Rose. There was a silence in the library long enough that she heard the fire shift in the grate. Rose, he said. He said it the way she had used to imagine her real name being said. By her mother. By no one else. Not by anyone in 11 years. Rose, he said again, as if learning a new word. I am sorry. For what? For the file. For the fact that it exists. For the 11 years of work it took to bring you to a library where I could give it to you. For a great many things I am not going to enumerate because we would be here until dawn. Dawn would be a problem. Dawn would be the smaller of the problems on that list. She laughed, the smallest possible laugh. There is something I should tell you, and I am going to tell you now, because if I do not, I am going to tell you in 50 years, and you are going to be furious with me for waiting. All right. My house crest is a rose, with thorns. She blinked. Since when? Since 1283. Ah. Yes. That is very inconvenient. It is one of the more inconvenient things that has ever happened to me, yes. His voice was very level. The eyes in the firelight were not. Which is, in the end, a long list. I am only telling you so that, if you ever see the crest on a wax seal, or a doorway, or the back of a tapestry in this house, you understand that I am not, in fact, claiming you by name in advance. The crest predates you by approximately 600 years. Aurelius. Yes. That is the most absurd thing anyone has ever said to me. I am aware. 600 years before I was born, your family put a rose on its flag. With thorns. With thorns. I would like to note, he said, that the thorns are historically the more important element of the crest. The rose is decorative. The thorns are the point. Of course they are. He looked at her. The almost smile resolved, for 1 second, into a real one. Small, startled, embarrassed, almost a boy's smile, on a face 400 years older than any boy. It was gone before she could be sure she had seen it. But she had seen it. She did not say anything about it. She just held the moment in her chest, the way one holds a thing one intends to keep. She held the folder in her lap. She did not open it. Not that night. 2 days passed. She read the file. She drank wine for the first time in her career. She sat in the gardens with the file in her lap and thought about everything she had ever done for the guild, every contract, every name. She found when she walked back into the castle that evening that she did not feel guilty. The guild had built her like a tool. The tool felt nothing about its uses. She decided, somewhere on the walk back, that she did not want to be a tool anymore. She had perhaps stopped wanting to be one the moment a man in a silver coat had taken her hand in a ballroom and looked at her like a person. Marius found her in the gardens the next afternoon. He had been hovering for 2 days with the particular hovering of a man who had drafted a sentence and was waiting for the precisely correct moment to deliver it. He came down the gravel path in a long dark cloak against the daylight. Even at 3 in the afternoon, in the well-tended garden of his oldest friend, he looked like a man being marched somewhere against his will. He sat down beside her. He did not say anything for several seconds. Marius. Rose. She looked at him. He told you. He told me. All right. I have, in the interest of full disclosure, also been the one taking your weapons. Through the maid, who is my niece by a great deal of marriage, she felt very guilty about the slipper. She wanted me to tell you specifically. She practiced the apology. Of course she did. You understand. I understand. Good. He folded his thin hands in his lap. He looked for a long moment at the dry fountain. I had a speech prepared. I have decided not to deliver it. There is no point lecturing a woman about a fire she is sitting inside. That is a kindness. I do not do kindnesses, I do efficiencies. He paused. I am going to tell you something he will not. The last person he loved was a mortal woman, 400 years ago, who died in his arms of a fever in the third winter of his reign. He has not spoken her name aloud since. He does not remember her face. He remembers, exactly, the weight of her in his arms. That is what he has carried for 400 years. Marius's voice was very level. I am telling you this so that you will understand, if he is sometimes slow to allow himself a thing, that he is not being slow because he does not feel it. He is being slow because he remembers exactly what it costs. She was very still. Marius. Yes? Why are you telling me this? Because I would like, in the time I have left, to be wrong about one of these. You are the fourth. I have been right about the first three. I would like to be wrong about you, Rose. It would, frankly, improve my mood for some time to come. She turned her head. He was looking at the fountain, not at her. His hands were folded very correctly in his lap. She reached out very carefully and put her warm hand over both of his cold ones for 1 second. He did not pull away. He did not look at her. After a moment, he said, with great dignity, I am going back inside. It is too bright. Yes, Marius. You will tell no one of this conversation. No one. Good. He stood up. He walked back up the gravel path. He did not look back. She sat on the bench with the file closed in her lap and her warm hand still tingling from the cold of his, and understood that Lord Marius, 3rd century, desiccated hawk, oldest friend of the king of vampires, had just made her, in his own complicated way, family. She cut her finger on the 17th night, the letter opener on the writing desk. The cut was small and clean, the blood bright and red and stupid. She remembered, in his library. He was reading by the fire. She looked up. He had gone still. It was a different stillness than the ballroom stillness. The ballroom stillness had been performance. This was the underneath. This was what a vampire was when he was not pretending to be a man. The book was open in his hands. His eyes had not moved from the page. They were also not, in any real sense, reading the page. Aurelius. Yes. Are you breathing? No. Okay. She wrapped her finger in the handkerchief she had brought specifically because some habits do not die. She did not get up. She did not leave the room. She watched him with the calm, professional curiosity of a woman who had spent 11 years studying predators. And she said, What does it smell like? Don't. I'm asking. He closed the book. He set it down. He did not move from the chair. Iron, he said. And you. Mostly you. I have been carefully not paying attention to what you smell like for 11 days. I am currently paying attention. That sounds exhausting. It is unreasonably exhausting, yes. Do I smell good? Rose. I'm trying to lighten the mood. Do not. All right. She sat very still. He sat very still. The fire shifted. After a minute, very carefully, he said, I am going to leave the room now. Aurelius? Yes. You don't have to leave the room. I think I do. You really don't. He looked at her. The gold flecks in his eyes were brighter than she had ever seen them. There was a slight, alarming sharpness at the corner of his mouth that had not been there a minute ago. "You should be afraid of me right now," he said. "I'm not." "Why?" "Because you've been not eating me for 11 days while I was actively trying to kill you. I don't think a cut finger is going to change anything." He laughed. It was the first time she had heard him laugh. It came out of him as if it had been startled. "That," he said, "is an extremely unsentimental way to look at it. I'm a very unsentimental woman. I am noticing." The sharpness at the corner of his mouth was slowly settling. His shoulders, which she had not noticed had risen, lowered a fraction. He inhaled. He exhaled. The first breath was unsteady. The second was better. "I am not going to leave the room." "Good. I am, however, going to ask you to put the handkerchief over the cut more thoroughly." "Fair." She wrapped the finger more carefully. He watched her do it, eyes that were, for a moment, exactly the eyes of a man very tired and very hungry and was not, would not, did not. "I'd like to read by the fire with you for a while longer." "It's all right." He picked up his book. She picked up hers. They read until the dawn he was not supposed to watch came up through the east windows of a library he never sat in at this hour, and a vampire king and a former assassin sat together and read in silence, pretending very carefully not to be doing anything important at all. The guild's first message arrived the next morning. Small folded paper, black wax, no name. The handwriting was Brennan's, who had trained her for 3 years. The message read, "Are you compromised, or have you simply forgotten how to read a calendar? The next message will not be a question. B." She brought it to Aurelius. He read it. He folded it. He set it on his desk, beside the small white queen and the pressed leaf and the folded note that said, "No." "All right," he said. "Now we begin." Chapter 4. The Box. She went to him 3 days later. She had been thinking, relentlessly, the same 6 thoughts in different orders, until she reached the small, clear place at the end of the thinking, where the answer is obvious and has been there the whole time. She was tired of being a weapon someone else pointed. If she was going to stay alive, she had to be alive as someone, as Rose. She found him in his study. He looked up. He set down his pen. "You have a face on," he said. "Where are my knives?" His mouth did the place of a smile. "That is going to require a small tour." He led her down a corridor she had not been shown, down a short flight of stairs, through a door. A small room, lined floor to ceiling with shallow drawers. Each drawer had a brass label in a clean, even hand she recognized. A date and a description. Day 3, hairpin, bodice. Day 5, dagger, boot, right. Day 12, 2 darts, inner sleeve. She walked the length of the room. 23. 23. 23 returned. There are 5 I left because they didn't seem load-bearing. You catalogued them. Heloise catalogued them. She catalogued the household linen last year. She is an enthusiast. Rose walked to the wall. She placed both hands flat against it. She breathed, very slowly, for several seconds. "You have," she said carefully, "an entire room of my knives." "Yes." "That you collected, one at a time, over 19 days while I was trying to figure out where they were going, while leaving feathers and chess pieces and pressed leaves." The leaves were Marius. The leaves were Marius. He is a romantic. He thinks I do not court correctly. He believes in small tokens. The man who walked up to me in a corridor and threatened me with a 300-year survival lecture. He is complicated. She turned, very slowly, to look at him. He was leaning against the door frame. His silver hair was loose tonight, falling forward across one shoulder. The candlelight made it look like spilled water. His arms were folded. His expression was the place of the smile. She had a long, dangerous, irritating sensation that she was going to start laughing and not be able to stop. I have a room. You have an armory, technically. I had 3 knives left this morning. You had 4. You missed the one in the hat pin. I have not worn a hat in 19 days. The fact that you have a hat pin without a hat is, itself, a tactical decision I have grown to admire. I returned that one without taking it. It seemed personal. She closed her eyes. She breathed. She opened her eyes. You let me keep planning to kill you for 19 days, she said. I wanted to see who you would choose to be. While you were inventorying my weapons in an alphabetized cabinet. It is chronological, not alphabetical. Heloise was very firm. Aurelius. Yes. This is the most unhinged thing anyone has ever done to me, and I once worked a contract on a man who kept 7 peacocks in a closed room. I want to hear that story, and you are smiling. That is not a smile. That is the place where a smile would live if I had decided to allow one. You have used that line on me 4 times in 21 days. I no longer believe it. He looked at her. The almost smile resolved. He laughed. It was the laugh from the night of the cut finger, but longer this time. A real laugh, the surprised laugh of a man who had not laughed properly in years. His shoulders moved. His face changed. The candlelight caught the silver of his hair as he ducked his head, and for one entirely unguarded second, he was not the king of vampires. He was a man Rose had stumbled into, who happened to be 400 years old and very tired and, apparently, also funny. She watched him. She decided several things in that watching. I am told, he said, when he had recovered enough to speak, that you find me very serious. Who told you that? Marius. Of course, Marius. He is concerned. He thinks I am not being adequately charming. He drew up a list. Music, travel, the weather, annotated, not the sun, you fool. And, in his own hand and underlined twice, make her laugh, you are a disaster. Marius wrote, you are a disaster? He underlined it twice. He had it sealed. With wax. With 2 kinds of wax. She put both hands over her face. Her shoulders were shaking. She was, helplessly, laughing. The loud, ugly, breath-stealing kind of laugh she had not allowed herself in 11 years. He watched her with a kind of stunned tenderness he did not at any point try to hide. When she could finally speak, she said, Aurelius. Yes. I am not at all confident I am going to survive being in love with you. He went very still. It was a different stillness than the predator stillness. It was the stillness of a man who had just heard something he had been waiting 400 years to hear, and was, just for the moment, unable to do anything else. Rose? Yes? He uncrossed his arms. He came forward and stopped in front of her. He was, she realized, a head taller. She had not, in 19 days, allowed herself to notice. He held out his hand, palm up. In it was the silver-laced dagger from her boot. The first weapon she had brought into his court, her favorite. The one she had sharpened every night for 4 years. You can take this, he said quietly, and walk out tonight. The choice is real. I have prepared it. A property in the south I have owned under another name for 90 years. A woman in the village who will tell anyone who asks that you have been her dead sister's friend for a decade. A guild contact who will file your death by drowning, with a body that is not yours buried under your old name. You walk out tonight. You are dead by next Tuesday. You are alive in the south by the Tuesday after. That is one choice. She looked at him for a long time. Aurelius. Yes. That is a kindness, not an exit. I know. You know. I know. The guild always finds people eventually. The plan buys you 20 good years, maybe 25. After which they find your body in the South, and someone in this court receives a polite letter informing them the death record was incorrect. I have written you the best escape I am capable of. It is still not, in the long term, an escape. Why are you offering it? Because it is the longest life I can give you that does not involve me. And the other? You stay. As what? As Rose. Not as a guest of the court, he said. Not as a petitioner, not as an asset. As yourself. With these, he indicated the cabinet, given back. With me, if you want me. Without me, if you don't. The guild will not pursue you under my name. They have learned twice in my reign what that costs them. She thought about how many times she had drawn that knife, how many times she had cleaned it, how many times she had checked in some hotel room or alley that it was still there. She thought about a property in the South she would never see, in a village where the dead sister's friend would eventually also die. She reached out and pushed the dagger very gently away. I don't need it tonight, she said. His hand closed around it. He set it on the shelf. All right, he said. He did not, she noticed, sound triumphant. He sounded the way one sounds when a long-held breath is finally let out. She looked up. He was very close. He had not, this entire conversation, allowed himself the smallest reach toward her. She understood with absolute clarity that he was not going to. He would wait. He would wait for her to decide what the answer was. He would wait, if he had to, for years. She did not have years. She reached up. She put her warm hand against his cool cheek. He closed his eyes. His breath, when it left him, was unsteady. Aurelius. Yes. Look at me. He opened his eyes. The gold flecks were brighter than she had ever seen them. There was nothing predatory in them. There was only a man who had been carefully, professionally, not allowing himself a thing for 400 years, looking at the thing. She rose up onto her toes. She kissed him. His mouth was cool and careful, and absolutely still for 1 second, as if he had forgotten what to do with the gesture. And then he remembered, and the careful thing under the carefulness opened, and he kissed her back, the way a man kisses a woman he has not allowed himself in 3 centuries, which is to say, very slowly and very precisely, and as if he had been thinking about exactly this for 19 days, and had not, in 19 days, allowed himself the words for it. One of his pale hands came up. It cupped the side of her face. The single silver ring was cool against her temple. He pulled back. He pressed his forehead to hers. That was a great deal of self-control walked away from in approximately 4 seconds. Sorry. Do not be sorry. I am not really sorry. I am extremely glad. What do we do now? Now, he said, we eat. Then we sleep. Then we figure out the guild. She laughed. It was a small, exhausted, very real laugh. That is the most domestic thing a vampire king has ever said to me. Rose, every sentence I have ever said to you is the most domestic thing a vampire king has ever said to anyone. I am, currently, completely off script. Marius has filed a formal complaint about me, in writing, sealed with 2 kinds of wax. She laughed again. This time it had air in it. This time it sounded like something a person might do. All right, she said. Then let's eat. The feeding came later, the 23rd night, after he had been 3 days awake handling the Volkov border, after she had watched him hold his shoulders the same way for 9 hours at council. She walked into his study and found him sitting in front of the fire with both hands flat on his knees, the way a man sits when he is making himself stay seated. She closed the door. He did not look up. How long? She said. 2 weeks. You haven't fed in 2 weeks. I am working through some moral questions. About what? Whether I would like to. She crossed the room. She knelt in front of his chair. She set her warm hands on his knees. He was cold under the silk. Aurelius. Rose. I want to. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm telling you that I want to. He looked at her for a long time. Why? Because you're my king and you are exhausted, and the system is rigged, and you have not asked me for a single thing in 23 days. That isn't, and because, she said more quietly, I am tired of being a thing I am given to. I would like, for once, to be a thing I give. His breath, then, was not steady. He nodded. She tilted her head. He bent forward and pressed his cool lips once, very gently, against the place under her jaw, asking permission with his mouth. She turned her head a small fraction more. He bit. A sharp pressure, brief, that opened into a warmth so disorienting she had to brace one hand against the arm of the chair. It was not what she had expected. She had expected something physical. What she got was something witnessed, as if every quiet thing she had ever felt and never spoken was being read off her, gently, by someone who was not judging it. It lasted perhaps 12 seconds, perhaps 30, perhaps a year. When he pulled back, he held her face in both hands. He did not speak for a long minute. What was that? She whispered. That, he said very carefully, was the best thing that has happened to me in 3 centuries, and I am going to need a moment. Aurelius. Yes. You are not allowed, she said, to say things like that to me casually. I am not equipped. Noted. He held her face. She held his wrists. The fire moved. Somewhere outside, an owl called. He did not let her go. After a moment, he said, in a voice she had not heard him use before, smaller than his real voice. Rose. Yes, I would like to tell you something. I am only going to be able to tell you once, tonight, while I am still not entirely under control. Tomorrow it will be much harder. All right? I have been afraid of you for 23 days. She did not move. I am not afraid of what you came here to do. I have not been afraid of that since the first night. I am afraid of what you are doing now. I am afraid of the size of it. I have done this once before, 400 years ago, with a woman whose name I have not said aloud since the 3rd winter of my reign. I held her for the fever. The fever did not care that I was a king. I sat in a chair beside her bed for 9 days. On the 9th day she died, and I learned what immortality actually is. The thing that watches the things it loves end. I have not allowed it again. I have not, for 4 centuries, allowed it. And I sat in my study tonight, with my hands flat on my knees, and tried not to allow it. And you walked in. And you set your warm hands on my knees. And you said you wanted to be a thing you gave. And I understood I had already allowed it, weeks ago, without my permission. There was nothing left to refuse. He stopped. He did not look at her. His forehead was still pressed to hers. His pale hands had not moved from her face. She did not speak for a long minute. She did not have a speech prepared. She did not have a response ready. She had been a professional for 11 years and she had no professional answer for this. She said, in the end, the only true thing she had. Aurelius, I am here. I am here tonight. I am here tomorrow. I am here as long as I am here. I cannot promise you the rest. No one can promise anyone the rest. But I can promise you that the time we have, you have. All of it. You will not sit alone in a study with your hands on your knees while I am in this house. You will not. Not while I am alive. He breathed. He was, she realized, crying, in the way she had not known a vampire could cry. A single thin track of something dark from one eye, quickly absorbed by the silver of his hair where it fell forward. He did not look up. He did not let go of her face. She did not look at the track of dark. She held his wrists. She let him have the minute. When he finally pulled back, he had composed himself. The composure was thinner than it had been before this conversation. She could see the seams.
"All right," he said softly. "Now the guild. Tomorrow. Tomorrow." "For tonight," he said, "we read." "For tonight," she said, "we read." Chapter 5. The Claiming. Brennan came on the 26th day, exactly when Aurelius and Rose had both said he would. Alone, on foot, late afternoon, through the front gate, with a polite letter of introduction in his hand. Rose was waiting in the gatehouse, alone. She had asked. Aurelius had said yes. Marius had filed that morning his second sealed complaint. So she stood in the small stone gatehouse in a plain gray dress, one knife at her thigh, returned to her by Aurelius the day before with the comment, "just in case." Brennan came in, a small, spare man with a face like a polite knife, who had taught her how to walk into a room without being noticed, leave one without being remembered, and lie about her name in 7 languages. He took off his hat. He smiled. "Cecily," he said, "you look well." "Rose?" "Excuse me. My name is Rose." He did not flicker. He never flickered. But she had known him for 11 years, and she knew which absence of flicker meant what, and the absence of this particular flicker meant that he had heard her and that he was now adjusting. "Rose," he said. "Lovely. Has it been Rose the whole time?" "It has been Rose for the last 6 days." "Ah." He sat on the bench. He set his hat on his knee. "I am going to assume the contract is not going to be completed." "You are correct." "I will need to take that back to the table. They will need a reason." "I have one." She sat opposite him. She had practiced this conversation 17 times in the mirror over the last 3 days. She knew where the guild's actual pressure point was. She leaned forward. "Brennan," she said, "the contract was issued on the basis of a false brief. My parents did not die at this court's hand. The guild's vetting failed. I have the documentation. So does the king. If this contract is enforced, the guild will be in breach of its own founding charter, and 3 of the 7 seats on the table will be obligated to move against the contract issuer, which is something they have been looking for an excuse to do for 9 years. Brennan looked at her for a long beat. "You know about the 3 seats." "Because you taught me." "Damn it. Walk away. Tell them I am compromised. Tell them I am dead. Tell them whatever you want. We do this clean or we do it the other way, which will be very expensive for the table." "You are bluffing about 3 of the seats." "I am not." "You are not." She did not blink. He had taught her that, too. He sat for a moment, looking past her at the small leaded window of the gatehouse. "I never liked this contract," he said. "I know." "I told them." "I know." He turned his hat over once in his hands. He set it back on his knee. "The contract issuer," he said carefully, "is a man named Halloran from the Western Branch. He has been blocking my seat for 6 years. He has a son doing the work I should be doing for half the result. Halloran is also the man who, 11 years ago, recruited a 16-year-old girl on the worst day of her life with a story about a vampire and her dead parents." He paused. "I do not know if you knew about Halloran specifically." "I knew there was a him, I did not know the name." "Now you do." "Now I do." "What you have just handed me, Rose, is the leverage I have been waiting 6 years for. 3 seats moving against him ends his career." She had not, in 11 years, seen him angry. She did not see it now. She saw something colder, the professional satisfaction of a man who had been waiting his entire career for one specific door to open. "You are not walking away because I asked you to." "I am not." "You are walking away because I have given you the knife." "You have given me the knife." He smiled. It was the first real smile she had ever seen on his face. It looked terrible there. "I appreciate it, Rose. I owe you one. The table will be hearing from me by Tuesday. Halloran will be retired by the end of the month." "You are not promoted, are you?" "I am about to be." "Get out of my office before I change my mind." "This is your office." "Then get out of it." She stood up. He stood up. At the door he paused. He looked her up and down once, the long professional look he had given her every morning for 3 years when she had been his apprentice. "You found something," he said. "Yes." "Worth it." She thought about the chess piece, the folded note, the fire in the library, the owl who had brought her a mouse. "Yes." "All right, kid." He put on his hat. He walked out. She did not cry until he was through the gate. The Volkov letter arrived 2 days later. Dmitry Volkov, head of a clan abutting the eastern marches, formally requested the surrender of the king's mortal asset as a gesture of clan goodwill. In lieu of the disputed border tariffs, Volkov had this week decided to make an issue. Aurelius read it. He set it down. He has wanted that border concession for 40 years. He is using her as leverage, Marius said. What is the concession actually worth? Rose said. Marius and Aurelius both looked at her. Approximately 12,000 gold a year in tax revenue for the next century, Marius said. The largest concession he could ask for without provoking war. And if you give it up, the treasury will absorb it. We will manage. And if you don't, then he comes for you, and the answer is open war. 300 lives across the eastern marches, 2 trade routes lost. We win. It is a stupid war. So you give him the concession. There is a third option. Marius made the small sound. Aurelius, he said, you are not going to do what I think you are going to do. I am. What is the third option? Said Rose. Marius turned to her. He claims you. Formally. In ceremony. Every vampire in this kingdom learns of it within the day. Volkov learns within the hour, because he has spies in this house and we will deliberately leak it through one. From that moment, you are not a mortal asset. You are claimed of the king. To take you, Volkov would have to declare war on the throne. The leverage is gone. And what does that cost? She said. It costs, said Marius, the king's discretion for the rest of his very long life. It costs his court a great many political maneuvers that depend on him being unattached. It costs you, he turned the full weight of his 312 years on her, the small life of a free mortal. You will be his. Other vampires will know it. Other guilds will know it. There is no taking it back. She looked at him. He was, she realized with a small, painful tenderness, looking at the floor. Aurelius. He looked up. Is this what you want? I want, he said, whatever you want. I'm asking what you want. He breathed out. Yes, I want this. Then I want this. Marius made the small sound. It was slightly less aggrieved this time, slightly more like a man who had, against his will, become invested in an outcome. Fine, he said. I will arrange the ceremony, the night after next. You, he turned to Aurelius, give me 3 days for the formal language. And you, he turned to Rose, please, for the love of 7 centuries of decorum, wear something other than gray. She laughed. Yes, Marius. Thank you. The ceremony was in the old ritual chamber under the castle, smelling of beeswax and dust and underground stone. The blade was steel and bone, not silver. Rose wore green. The first dress she had worn into this court had been green, and she had stopped being that person, and she wanted, somehow, to honor it. The chamber held 12. Marius, Baroness Althea, who had come in case anyone needs a witness who can actually be trusted to write it up properly. Heloise, who had bowed to Rose with the gravity of a woman acknowledging a colleague. A handful of the inner court. Aurelius stood in front of her. He cut his palm. The blood came up dark. He held out his hand. Drink, he said. She drank. It tasted of old wine and stone. When she pulled back, her lips were stained. He leaned in and pressed his mouth to the place under her jaw. He bit. The mark, when it set, was a small, clean rose with thorns. His house crest. Visible. Permanent. Marius, in the small, flat voice of a man who has read these words at 3 reigns and is on his 4th. She is claimed of the king, under his blood and his name and his protection. Let no member of this house, this kingdom, or any allied house lay hand upon her without answer to him. So spoken, so witnessed. The court replied, so witnessed. Aurelius, very softly. Rose. Aurelius. He took her hand. They walked out of the chamber together. Volkov heard, as planned, within the hour. He sent a polite, formal letter withdrawing his request and reopening the border at a substantially reduced figure, which Aurelius accepted with the small, gracious smile of a man who has just spent significantly less than he was prepared to. The guild filed the contract as void. Brennan was promoted. The Baroness Althea began inventing a new backstory for Rose, the king's claimed. Within a month, it included an affair with a minor southern duke, a lineage so ancient it predated 3 current kingdoms, and a secret religious devotion to something obscure. Dear, I forget the name. Rose asked the Baroness to please write the next one as a romance novel. The Baroness did. It sold, in pamphlet form, very well. Late at night, in their rooms, Rose lay with her head on his chest, her hand over the place where his heart used to beat. Aurelius? Yes. You never asked me who hired me. It does not matter. It might. It does not. They are your past. I am your future. That is a very flattering line. It is also true. Aurelius? Yes. I love you. He was very quiet for a long moment. I have been waiting, in some sense, for this entire conversation since the night you walked into my ballroom with a knife under your dress and forgot to drink your champagne. Is that a yes? That is the most yes I am capable of. She laughed. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, with the carefulness of someone testing the temperature of a thing, Aurelius, in 50 years. The cool hand under hers did not move. He did not answer. The silence was, she understood, deliberate. He had been waiting for her to be the one to bring it up. He was not going to lie. He was not going to perform. He was going to wait until she had asked the actual question. In 50 years, she said again. What? In 50 years, I am going to be 467 years old. And you are going to be in your 70s. That is the math. I have done it. I do it daily. I do it every time you cut your finger on a letter opener. All right. There was a long silence. What if I asked? He did not answer. She did not turn her head. She kept her warm hand on the cool place over his still heart. I am not asking tonight. I am asking whether the asking is allowed. A very long pause. The asking is allowed. I want you to know that. I would also like you to know that I am going to refuse to answer every time you ask for at least 10 years. After 10 years, I will think about it. After 20, I will start to consider it. I am telling you because I do not want you to think, in any of those years, that I am refusing because I do not love you enough. I am refusing because I love you exactly enough, and I have, in this life, made the mistake of doing the wrong large thing for the right reason, and the consequences last forever. In my case, literally. So I am going to be slow about this one. Is that all right? That is all right. You are sure? I am sure. Good. He breathed out. The breath was unsteady. I am not, in any of those 10 years, going to spend a single one of them away from you. That is the other half of the answer. The slowness is about the one thing. Everything else is already decided. She closed her eyes. She nodded, very small, against his chest. She did not cry. She had used up her crying for the month. She did, however, feel a small clean settling under her ribs of a question that had been sitting there since the night she said her real name. The question was not answered. It had been heard. That, she understood, was the same thing as answered for now. After a moment, she said, in the voice of a woman closing a difficult door for tonight and reopening a simpler one. Tell me about the 7 Romans. I knew 3 Romans. Were any of them good kissers? Rose. I am only asking. He laughed, easier this time. He pulled her closer. His cool cheek rested against her hair. He began, in the low, quiet voice of a man with 400 years of small stories he had never told anyone, to tell her about a man named Quintus, in approximately 230 AD, who had been an extremely bad dinner host, but a surprisingly competent Stoic. Outside the window, on the stone sill she had taken to leaving open, Strix landed soundlessly, dropped a small mouse with the dignity of an empress, and looked in. Why does she keep bringing me mice? You are family now. Oh. Yes. She closed her eyes. He held her hand. The candle on the bedside table burned down slowly. In a kingdom built of stone and centuries, a vampire king and a former assassin lay still in the dark and listened, together, to the small sounds of a snowy owl eating a mouse on their windowsill, and the low, even voice of a 400-year-old man telling stories about Romans. The question that had not been answered was, somewhere in the dark, still patiently waiting. For tonight, they had each other, and they had stories, and a snowy owl with terrible manners eating a mouse on their sill. That was enough. It would be enough, in fact, for a very long time.